Welcome to So You Want to Be a Real Estate Agent. This is season 4, Learning from Legends. I'm your host, Meredith Fogel, and I'm really excited to have our guest, Shelby Osborne, with us today. Thank you, Shelby, for joining us. Shelby is a CEO of Five Pillars Nation, and she is geographically located in Charlotte, North Carolina, but she leads a community of agents, oversees a community of agents nationally. And what she's done, I think, is really intriguing and kind of innovative. It's a little different from the traditional team structure or even real estate company structure that we often see evolving, and it's kind of taken on a different form. So I'm excited for Shelby to share how she got where she is and what this format looks like, and how it's working for her. So Shelby, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah. We're excited to hear from you. All right, so start by telling us. Oh, and I forgot to mention this. I have to mention you are also a podcast host of a podcast called Agent Goldmine. So we'll learn more about that as we go here. But tell us about your background. What first got you engaged in real estate to begin with?
Yeah, sure. So I was in the Army for 6 years before getting out of the Army to pursue real estate full time. And what kind of like led me to that decision is because in the military, there's a lot of benefits, but also a lot of restrictions and time freedom of choices in your life of what to do are really restricted. And so whenever something like that happens, I feel like most people just go to the opposite, right? So like, what is the opposite of this amount of control? It's the freedom that, real estate investing hypothetically can provide you. So I got really into real estate investing, this idea of buying rental properties so that way you can make money in your sleep. I was all over Bigger Pockets and Robert Kiyosaki books and decided that I was going to get out of the Army so that way I could just buy a bunch of rentals and ride off into the sunset. But it was quick, before I realized that I didn't have the money to do this. And I needed a way to build, acquire active income to fuel my passive income dreams. So I was like, you know what, I'll just get my real estate license. I bet selling real estate will be easy. And then I can just continue to invest. Well, joke's on anyone who thinks that real estate is easy.
Hence the whole theme of this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But so that's what I did. I got my real estate license. I got out of the military in January of 2018. And that first year I went full steam ahead for agent life and investor life. And I was the Keller Williams Rookie of the Year for all of North and South Carolina. That first year I closed 48 deals. And acquired 16 rentals by the end of it. And from there, just kept, growing. It was after year one, decided to start a traditional team, kind of like you mentioned, and grow that way, continue to invest. And over time, it's evolved a bunch of times.
Wow. Okay. So let me stop you at that after year one, because that kind of stuck out for me. You decided to grow a team.
Yes.
That's pretty quick to grow a team. What was it that made you think, okay, time for a team after year one?
It's so funny that you say that because I remember it was month 9 of my first year when I went to the Keller Williams leadership and was like, hey, I want to start a team. And they were like, oh, that's so cute. Like, they were like, good. Yeah, right. But I was like, no, for real. I think I'm going to do it. And looking back now, I think that I would have done exactly what they did. Been like, oh, that's cute. Because you just don't have usually you don't have the reps or the life experience or the leadership or all of these things.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, I was on track to closing almost 50 my first year. So I did have some reps, but I also had years of experience in the military with leadership and developing systems and timelines and overseeing communication at all these different levels. Mm-hmm. So I had this, skill set that I didn't even realize at the time that would make it possible. But to loop back to your question, you asked, why basically did you want to start a team? Right. And it was never a dream of mine. Like when I got out of the military, I was like, no more overseeing people. I had just got done overseeing these 18, 19-year-old kids who chain smoked cigarettes and drank Monsters for breakfast. And I was like, I don't want to deal with people and their problems. But what I found is in my first year of trying to do a lot with my own business and acquire rentals and build a community within my city, I found that there were people who were attracted to that. A lot of people who were in the military or people, not in the military, who were like, I want to invest. I want to use my license as a means to generate active income and fuel my passive. Like, let's start this thing. So it was really their ideas coming to me that led me to the decision of, maybe this isn't about necessarily what I want. This is a demand that, and I love these people, so fuck it. Why not?
So I think, so this is an interesting piece, I think, because what you're articulating, I think, is that the idea to build the team came from something that was kind of like put into your lap in a way and presented to you, but there's also a need there. And it wasn't necessarily your need. It was a need that was coming from other people who saw value in you.
Right.
That almost like flips on its head, I think, a little bit the way that people often approach building a team. It's either, I think, often because, and from Keller Williams, I was also with Keller for a long time, and it's a fabulous book, Millionaire Real Estate Agent, which we used to call the Red Book there, which really gives you a blueprint for building a team. And it's very prescribed. Like, you're the solo producer, you bring on an assistant, then you bring on a buyer's agent, and then you might build up a listing division at some point. You go through very specific steps to build the team. And that can feel like a really good idea for an agent who just feels really busy. And also it can feel like a really good idea for an agent who feels kind of lonely, because this is a business where it's easy to feel lonely. You're like a person doing a ton of production, even though you're around people all the time. Your relationships are pretty transactional. So you kind of want that camaraderie a little bit sometimes of somebody else. And I would argue that where there's a need that's non-emotional, that is probably a good reason to build a team. And it sounds like you had that need, and it's beautiful that it came to you that way, and that you had the built-in skill set too. That's the other piece. And without even having the self-awareness that you had it, like it was there for you, and then became, it emanated itself once you took it over.
For sure. It was kind of a perfect storm, but it is interesting though, after having had the traditional team for I guess it was 2.5 full years, and we just kept growing and growing and growing. Then it hit this point of like, man, team life is, in my head, I was like, this trap. People build the team, and it depends on your market, depends on you and all the things, nothing is black and white. But for me, what I found is that the bigger that it got, in the beginning, when those people that were attracted to me and the energy were really like scrappy, just like I was, and they wanted to build something great. And, it was the very much like new entrepreneur mindset where it's like, whatever it takes for the team. But the more and more you grow, and that was another reason why, it was 5 Pillars Realty Group back in the day. But that was another reason why it was never the Shelby show. It was never Shelby. Osborne was my name at the time, Realty Group. It was something bigger than just me, right? But as time continued, I realized that, and the more and more like waves we created in our city, more and more people were attracted to that, but they weren't the same type of people. Like in the beginning, it was like, whatever it takes for the team, like we're all in this together. And then as it gets bigger and people are like, oh, that's cool. And I bet I can, they can teach me how to do this. I can use them. So it was a different perspective of the agents who were attracted to the model, which is one of the main reasons why I decided to switch it.
Really, really interesting. So it started to tilt back toward that kind of like transactional relationship. It feels like from what I'm hearing you say.
Totally.
That's so interesting. I was just sharing before we started recording, I was on a mastermind right before this with some other team leaders nationally, well, East Coast. And one was sharing, like, he's pretty new into this and trying to evaluate agents when they come on. And one of the other agents who has done a lot of intentional and some unintentional recruiting, she's very specific, and she wasn't always about who joined her team, because it kind of feels good sometimes when people are like, oh, I want to be with you, you have the things that I need, and I know you can help me, and you want to help. Like, as a leader, that's part of what drives us. But she said, she said she's got a pretty good filter now. She's like, I don't work with assholes, is what she said. I won't. She's like, I won't bring them on. I'm not working with them. And I don't need to. And she said, I've realized that I want to keep my team kind of small.
Yep.
And because of that, I'm not going to bring people on who don't feel aligned with the way that I operate and the way that I want to do business, or for you, maybe people who weren't aligned with that, whatever it takes for the team, and being scrappy. So at the point that you decided to then kind of like pivot into a different model, what did that like logistically look like for you? Did you have to have some hard conversations with people?
Yeah, that's this is so funny because I've been on several podcasts, but they've never asked this like series of questions. So this is really exciting for me.
Good.
Yeah, so logistically, what that looked like, I had so much, blood, sweat, tears, and love built into this. Like I was very emotionally connected to this, 5 Pillars Realty Group, what it was my baby, this whole thing. And so even making the decision alone was incredibly difficult. Not just for, I knew it would affect so many people's lives at that point, but also because my identity was very tied into whatever this was, which that's a whole nother conversation. But logistically, what it looked like was I talked to all of my admin first, because what I found time and time again is that the administrative personalities, the ones who are there to follow the structure and the systems and be helpful and all that stuff, are very different than the sales type of personalities.
Yeah.
And so I loved my admin so much. And so I went to them first and was like, hey guys, like, I cannot do this anymore. I love you so much, but I don't want to leave you hanging at all. So hypothetically, you have these skill sets now. You're transaction coordinators, you're listing coordinators, you can manage projects, you have operations background, like looking at all of them. And I'm like, you guys have skill sets and experiences that you could build your own businesses if you would like that. And honestly, across the board, there was one who didn't. But across the board, what I helped them do was start up a transaction coordinating company, a listing coordinating company. And then my operations, I got her a job with a giant wholesale company within the same industry, same role, all that stuff. So I had them all set up in a way that next I could pivot to the agents and say, hey, look, I know that you guys are fucking big babies. That sounds really bad, but like they're very used to having, everything taken care of for them in a lot of ways. And I was like, hey, don't freak out. You're going to be able to, you don't have to do 50-50 splits anymore. You can keep all of your, which 80-20, we're at EXP at this point. You can keep all of your 80% until you cap. But what you can do instead of, you're like, where's the leverage coming from? Well, you can hire out these new beautiful company owners directly for anytime you need business. Right. So everyone still got to work with each other. It just took me out of the financial overhead of maintaining the admin, and without the, oh my God, please just do what you're supposed to do, salespeople. And so everyone could be grownups. Amazing.
Wow. Okay. So I got to ask, did you take ownership in any of those companies that you helped set up?
I didn't. I thought about it, but so at this point in my time, I did not want to feel the responsibility for anyone else's successes or failures. Okay. And I did think about that. And I was like, no, because I know what's going to happen. They're so used to coming to me to solve problems as they start up their businesses. It'll still be like, hey, Shelby, hey, what do I do here? What do I do here? And I'm like, at this point, I'm like, no.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it sounds like this was very strategic. So you were solving a problem that was in front of you. Was there a vision that you had already created that you were working toward at this point? Or was this more kind of like a problem solve?
This was a problem solve. And at that point, I honestly didn't know even if I wanted to be in real estate long term. I was very burnt out. And I think a lot of people get this, like top performers as a solo agent into building this like monster of a team, traditional team. And I was just like, oh my gosh, when is it done? When is anything done? Because nothing is ever done in real estate and business. And I've accepted that now. But like, even when you're like, oh, I have this perfect system in place, right, everything's going to be great. Or this person is perfectly trained. It's perfect for one moment in time.
Yes.
And then tomorrow happens. And it's a constant, you know what I mean?
Yes. Which is fun when, like, for a while. I think it's kind of for people who are, visionaries and problem solvers, it engages us in a different way, but you're exactly right. It can lead to burnout pretty quickly. So in my head, as you're like talking me through this, I'm thinking, okay, how is she devoting so much of this time to helping, so generously, these other people get traction with these other companies and find a graceful exit path for these people, and still keeping your own business going and your own production going. But at this point in your head, you're like, I might not even do this anymore.
Well, I was not much into production at this point in time.
Okay.
I had followed the Gary Keller, I was doing periodic listings, but I had listing specialists, you know what I mean? So it was very pick and choose. And what I decided to do, because you're like, oh, if you're not in production and you shut down the team, like, how are you making money? Right. So at this point in time, I had 74 rental properties, which is a conversation for another day. But I also had all of, the leads coming in that I would give out to my team. And instead of giving them out for 50-50 splits, I just started a referral process. So I had a virtual assistant. Oh my God, no overhead was like my goal, like as low as possible, right? So I had a virtual assistant who, as the leads come into the organization, they're given out to only our top performers. It's a big difference too. I used to think everyone gets leads, everyone gets a chance. No, you prove your damn self. And once you can prove your damn self, then you can get some leads. But so the leads would go out to the people who I know would close, and the virtual assistant is the one who's doing the referral contract and tracking until completion, ensuring payout. So there is income that way through the rental properties, and then also through revenue share, which up until that point in time I didn't care about at all. And now it's a cool thing. EXP, the way that they set it up really is cool, depending on your type of business.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So at this point at this point in your career, were you with EXP or you're with Keller?
The entire organization left Keller about 4 months into being in a team. So that was in 2019. We shifted over.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay. All right. So you're there at this point. You're like, you've offloaded your admin staff. You've kind of transitioned out of production. You've got all these 74 doors that you're also having some income from, but also having to manage. And then at this point, are you like, okay, now my mind is open to a vision? Like, how do you get from there to the next milestone?
Took a long time. And that's something that I'm always fighting, because I want to have the exact pinpoint goal and the purpose and all of the, because I have a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I want to be like focused and directionally honed in on wherever I'm going. But after that decision was made and the team structure changed, I still did a lot, because I didn't exactly know where I wanted to go, but I know that I had built, the 5 pillars organization for years, and I didn't want to completely that. So we still did, once a week, which we still do, once a week training where we bring in speakers, and once a month we have the investor mastermind and the business development, depending on which skill level you are as an agent. So I continued those things, but what I did for the most part for that next year or so was just, what do I want to do with my life? Like, I don't know, like what brings me energy, and if I could sketch out my perfect day, what does it look like, and how far away am I, and how do I take one step closer every day to that reality? And so it was just a lot of like soul searching and continuing things to run. I didn't let anything die, but a lot of it was just like, what the fuck am I doing with my life?
Yeah. Which I think is probably something a lot of, people listening can relate to, especially if you're, building a team or building a business or running a company. That's I think something that helps us evolve constantly. But yeah,
Totally.
so did it kind of like naturally fall into place at some point? Because I know now you're in a position where you're overseeing hundreds of agents nationwide. So I'm like, connect the dots for us. How did you get from that point to where you are today?
Yeah, and it's 130, so not hundreds, but
okay, that's still a big number,
a chunk. So what that transition looked like is I did a lot of that thinking about, like, who do I want to, what conversations, what type of people do I leave feeling like energized? Like, who do I like talking to, or who are the type of people who I just, when a Zoom comes on the calendar or appointment to meet with, like, who am I dreading? Right. And I tried to identify patterns.
Okay.
And what I did was I realized that the people that I love talking to are the people who take ownership for their destiny, who aren't like, help me. They're like, hey, this is what I think. This is the research I've done based on your experience. What is your perspective? Those are two totally different conversations.
Yeah.
And so by identifying who I wanted to spend my time around, I realized that I wanted to shift 5 pillars into an entrepreneur incubator. So this is what we've become, is a place where entrepreneurs go to build their own empires, their own businesses alongside peers who are doing the same, because you hit the nail on the head when you said earlier, it can be lonely, right? This like entrepreneur island that we live on can be really lonely. And the people who are true leaders want to build their own destinies. So they don't want to follow any, they don't want to be on someone else's team. They want to build their own, right? So if I could provide a platform, a location for those type of people to come and side by side work towards their own goals, like with peers, like that's what Five Pillars Nation has become.
Amazing. Okay. So in that journey, how did you take like the first steps? Did you start with the people that you were already working with, or how did you begin to engage agents outside of your own kind of immediate sphere?
Yes, that's such a good question. And a lot of it was just being more purposeful with the things that I was already doing. So I've been on a ton of podcasts, usually in the investor space, not so much in the agent space. And then shockingly, when you are on investor podcasts, who do you attract? You attract investors. Right. And so I was like, damn, dude, I should get on some agent podcasts, you know? And so by getting on agent focused podcasts, because whatever you talk about is what you attract, right? The energy you put out is what you bring in. That's why we started our own podcast, the Agent Goldmine, theagentgoldmine.com. But also we are doing like Five Pillars already does this thing called Pints and Properties, which is a nationwide meetup. It's a real estate meetup.
I wonder what that was. Okay.
Yeah. So once a month in cities, you know, across the country, there's 24 cities now, 11 different states. We have Pints and Properties events, and you don't have to be a pillar to start one. You can be, you know, anyone, and then they're free, and that's a whole nother conversation. But by getting more purposeful about, you know, at events, like, hey, if you're an agent and you're trying to, you know, either create passive income or build a real business or whatever, we want to talk to you. And then same, you know, with the podcast, we're super not direct. It's like very like value forth, of course, but also like, I want to talk to people who have the dreams and the goals and the energy and the ownership and all of that stuff. And just by putting that out into the universe consistently, it is what you attract.
Yeah, exactly. And is anybody like invited to be part of this, or do you have kind of like a filter system for like the 130 that you oversee right now?
Yeah.
Is that, is there some kind of like a standard or a profile, or is it kind of going back to that gut, who are the people that you like to have conversations with and that energize you?
That is so funny that you say that, because as with everything, at least for me, it's like, it starts out as like action. I'm like an action first and then reflect and then adjust type of person. Yeah. And so it did start out with like gut. And a lot of it starts out with self-selection too, where we usually don't tell people, no, you can't be a part of it. But the conversation early is like, this is who we are, which we have written out, you know, and this is what we expect from members within the community. And the community has gotten big and strong enough so that way, when behavior exists that is not aligned with who we are, it is also maintained with it. Because I can't personally oversee 130 people, right? Like you just can't do it. So like in the military, they say, you know, groups of 5. Like within leadership, you can directly oversee 5 people, and those people can directly oversee 5. So anyway, we have now are written out exactly who we are. We have the self-selection, we have the internal alignment, but we also started this thing called pods, which I think are super important. So they're small groups of peers and 4 to 5 people, and it's not top-down led. Right. It's a peer group. Yeah. And that, you know, so by having, and they rotate every 4 months. So by having those people who, of course, there's like an outline of what I recommend you talk about with your pod, but I'm not in it. So you guys, whatever you need, whatever your goals are, whatever makes sense for you. But, you know, the outline there is like your goals for your finances, for your business, for your headspace, for your relationships, like all of these different things to promote communication and accountability within the, oh my God, I'm talking a lot. Okay.
No, this is great. This is great. This is all virtual, right? Since you're national.
It is virtual, but we do have some pretty strong hubs. So like Fayetteville, North Carolina is where we were founded.
Okay.
So, and then in Charlotte is where I am now. And we have like a big hub in Greensboro and in Tucson, Arizona, actually. So wherever there is like a hub, there's also in person. Like next week we have book club and we went to the Whitewater Rafting Center, you know, so it's like a small, within the organization as a whole, there are smaller in person in addition to the virtual.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. And for an agent who is, again, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, who is in this place of uncertainty, maybe when we're recording right now, we are in July of 2023. This podcast will probably drop in, I think, October at some point. Who knows where the market will be?
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have a little bit of a interest rate reduction and we'll have a uptick in inventory. But right now it's a tough market for agents out there. What are you, from like your position of hindsight, insight, and leadership, what are you giving to people in terms of like a, mindset work or any kind of like, I don't know, advice or, a way to kind of think about moving forward for people who are in that moment of, oh my gosh, should I continue with this? Should I go get a full-time job? Should I continue to grow my team? I know people who have left the industry entirely. I know people who had big teams and imploded the whole team and are now going back to solo production.
Yeah.
I know people have gone the completely other direction and really doubled down on their team building and bringing more people in. How do you guide people, or how do you, if that topic comes up in one of the pods or like a group that you're leading, what does that conversation look like for you?
This is I love this time, by the way, because it's like, of the people who are unsure, maybe not committed, this is a good opportunity for you because real estate's hard. It is hard. Yeah. But if you're sure that this is something that you want to do, this is your time because everyone else is leaving. Yeah. The more that you can double down on your efforts, which I can talk about in just a second, that once the market turns a little bit, it will have weeded out so much fluff of your competition and you will have gained so much more of the market share.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if you're in it, if you know in your heart, this is what you want to do, take every advantage. Now is your time. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. And you said you would talk about what are those things? What are you telling people to do right now? Where do you think people should be concentrating their focus?
Yeah. So this is another thing we were talking about all the time lately is how I think in real estate agent world as a whole, I don't think that most people believe in actually marketing. So like I've been to a ton of trainings and all this stuff about like lead gen and, a lot of the guidance is like, pick out your phone and have like 5 conversations a day or like, post once on social media, which I'm not saying don't do those things, but I'm saying that if you think of your your real estate agent life as an actual business and you look out to all of these other businesses out there, they have dedicated people, resources, money devoted to marketing. Yeah. And us agents, we don't ever do that for the most part. And so the conversations I'm having, it's like, do you actually have a repeatable process to generate new business into your business? What are you actually doing? And is it something where you can measure X amount of inputs will generate X amount of outputs? You know what I mean? And so like, whether that's cold calling, it doesn't have to be cold calling, or door knocking, or direct mail, or farming, circle prospecting, like whatever you do, social media, maybe it's content creation, and it doesn't matter. Everything works, but you have to know what your marketing plan is, and you have to treat it like a real business if you want real business results.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for those kind of like high eyes, which if you know the DISC assessment, that's what most buyers agents at least are, productive buyers agents, and many productive agents across the board. They are that high eye personality profile, meaning they're really good at relationships, maybe not so good at the details and the business tracking and the KPIs. What do you say to somebody who's like, yes, I know I should be doing that. No, not at all what I want to be doing.
Yeah. Different things depending on where they are in their business. So a lot of times, like I am a believer of you double down on your strengths and you leverage out your weaknesses. Yeah. So if it's something that you really like, it's you really don't want to do and you have the money to outsource it, by all means, like don't fight the feeling within. But also understand that, like we talked about in the beginning, like nothing's done. Just because you hire someone to do something, you're either, okay, you have two choices. You're either doing the thing or you're overseeing the person doing the thing. You can never relinquish the responsibility. But yeah, so I would say that. But also, if you are a high I, then put yourself in the positions to consistently lead generate by using the qualities of the high I. Just put yourself, maybe you're starting the meetup. Maybe you're doing a wine and design where you all have wine and you talk about how to design your house for your listings, or whether maybe you're pulling every social event in your city and you're going to all of them.
Yeah, right.
Like there's ways to, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So like you said, drill down on your strengths and try to emphasize those things. And how important would you say doing something like getting involved in like the group of agents that you oversee or some kind of like networking is to an agent's future success?
I think it depends on the person. But I think that the percent of people who can be successful without a network is much smaller than the percent of people who really do need community and accountability, people side by side working on the same thing. So I don't think that it can hurt. I think it's, for the most of us, it's incredibly important.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant that you've done what you've done, because you've created this community of people who can share ideas, who can grow. I will say, I was like killing it as a solo producer in a small team for decades before I discovered the national group of agents, and I'm in several of them now, that I now mastermind and network with regularly. There are so many ideas out there under the sun that I never would have been exposed to. And I thought I had some pretty good ideas, and I probably did. And I've shared some of them, but the willingness of the general real estate community who is successful and who lives in this mindset of abundance and therefore is super willing to share everything is vast. And what we can glean from those people and grow as human beings and as business people is immeasurable. So I think it's great that you're doing what you're doing. And I know it's very much appreciated.
I love that you're a part of the communities too, because a lot of people will say, oh, they don't want to share with me, but most people do want to share. Most people do want to help. And if you're around a bunch of assholes, that's okay. Just change your group. You're not with the right,
exactly.
The right people are out there. Yeah.
Yep, exactly right. Shelby, this has been amazing. You have given us so much fabulous information. I have a whole page of notes that I've written down from what you've shared with us today. What else? Is there anything else you'd like to share? I know we've probably 4 or 5 more conversations that we could have that we could go in the direction of, but anything else that's relevant to kind of what we talked about today that you'd like to share?
I guess I would share is that I am systems oriented. So I have a checklist, cheat sheet, tool, for everything. So if there is something that you heard that you're like, oh, I'd like more about, to the listeners, if you want more information, I want you to reach out to me, and it's as simple as going to our Google Drive and hitting a share link for me to share too. So don't think that you're, I want to talk to you. I want to help. And that's all I do in my life now. And that's all I want to do.
That's awesome.
So hit me up.
Your joy. And how can people find you?
Yeah. On Instagram, you can go to The Shelby Show, or you can go to theagentgoldmine.com and you can listen to our podcast and hit me up on there as well.
Amazing. Shelby, thank you so much. This has been phenomenal. Your energy is amazing. And if you're just listening, you got to watch this too. Shelby has the coolest background. I don't know if that's wallpaper or what behind you, but it's very fun to look at.
Thank you.
Very cool. All right. We also want to thank our podcast sponsors who make the show possible: the Rozek team with Embrace Mortgage, Paul Hersani with First National Bank, Village Settlements, and Peak Settlements. And we want to thank you for listening, and Shelby again for being a fabulous guest today. This has been So You Want to Be a Real Estate Agent. We'll see you next time. If you're interested in learning how to become that go-to local real estate expert all the sellers call to give you their listings, read Farming for Real Estate Agents. You can pick up your copy today on Amazon, Kindle, on Audible, or anywhere you get books.